So today we're making apple cinnamon swirls. So into the mixer goes your flour, your sugar, baking powder, salt, cold margarine, and that gets mixed up in the mixer. Close the guard. Always close the guard, safety first. And you get it started and mixes up until you can't see the butter anymore, and the mixture becomes mealy, which is, I'll show you what that means as soon as it gets to that. It takes about 10 minutes to get to that point. So this is always on speed 1. So here's your mixer, and there's your dial. See, speed 1 is right here. This is what you do all your mixing on when you're doing biscuits, cinnamon biscuits, scones. Speed 3 we don't use very often. Speed 2, if you're in a hurry and you want to whip things up, you would use the speed 2. So always on the speed 1 to start with. The guard, the minute you open your guard, as you notice, the machine will stop. So you always have your guard engaged, and that again is about safety first. So you need 4 apples for this recipe. Now you wash your apples, of course, make sure the labels are off, wash them. Now the best way to do this, fastest way, is to core your apple with your chef's knife. Just take 4 slices and keeping the core intact like that. And now you're ending up with your apple pieces. Watch again. I just take it and I make a square of the cork. And that really is the simplest way. Now you take your apple, always put your apple down so that it is on a flat surface, so it's not rolling around. It's hard to dice properly and safely a rolling item. So you really want to put your apple down on the board so that we get chunks like this. So all 4 apples cut into chunks just like this. Don't peel it. Peeling is not necessary. If you're uncomfortable using this big of a knife with an apple, you can always use a paring knife because that works well too. Just slice through it. Always keep your hands safe by making sure you've got your fingers in the proper guard position, and you won't ever cut yourself as long as your fingers are in the guard position. So now the butter has disappeared and it's what's called mealy, and you can see if we look carefully, there are tiny little chunks of butter like this, and that's called mealy, and that's exactly what you want to get it to. You don't want to be able to see the butter, but you don't want to overmix at this point either. So again, close the guard, turn your mixer on, and then you're going to add the warm water. Now your warm water, it asks for 900 to 1,000 mLs of warm water. I'm going to put in about 900 to start with. I'm going to turn on my mixer to start. Press the button, your mixer starts, and through the chute that's provided, I'm going to put in 900, so almost all of it. But I'm going to reserve a little bit in the bottom because I want to see how the dough reacts. You don't know how much liquid is in your flour, so you've got to be careful that it's not too much. Now, that looks like actually the perfect amount. I'm not going to add any more water because you can see that the bowl is being cleaned by the blade. That's exactly what you want. That's actually perfect. So I'm going to let it go for a minute. And then I'm going to put it on my board. To start to roll out the cinnamon biscuits now, you need a bowl of flour for your hands, a rolling pin, cinnamon biscuit filling with a flat spatula, a flat-sided spatula, and you need beside you your cut apples and, of course, your baking sheets. So you need 3 baking sheets lined with parchment paper. So here we go. So take the blade right out and all the dough comes out. You also need a metal scraper. So a metal scraper is what you need as well. All right, now first thing, cut your dough in half. Make it into a rectangle. Cut it in half as exactly as you can, because it's easier to handle half than a full. Flour on the back, put your spare dough on the back. Now I'm going to flour this board. This is a little bit different than the yeast products like yeast dough, because with yeast dough you don't put a lot of flour on because you need the yeast dough to stick to the board. This, you need the flour underneath. I'm going to form my dough into a rectangle to start with, because that's the way I want it to end up. I want my dough to end up like this, as long as my rolling pin, and as deep as the fat part. So like that. That's how deep I want it. All right, flour on the bottom, flour on top. Now I start to roll out. And you have to really put your, all your strength into it, because it does take a little bit to get the dough rolled out, especially if it's a harder dough. And sometimes if you don't add enough water, it's really difficult to roll out. Now this is a little bit more difficult, but it's going to work. It's going to be just fine. So roll it out. And again, I want to keep in a rectangle. If my corners don't work, make your corners work by rotating your rolling pin. So out it goes. Okay, now check your length. Okay, it's as long as my rolling pin. It just has to be a little bit wider. Corners, corners, to get that corner. All right, we're ready to go. Onto that, you want to put about 2 cups of cinnamon biscuit filling, and just spread that around right to the edges, right to the edges. And notice I'm using the flat part, and that seems to work really well when you're spreading out the cinnamon biscuit filling. It's perfect. So my apples, I'm going to take half of my apples, and half of my apples go on the center of this cinnamon biscuit dough. There you go. Now, from the other end, the back end, start to roll. And that will encompass all the apples into the center, which is exactly what you want. Now, you're going to make sure your dough is even all the way along. So with your hands, but the first thing we're going to do, we're just going to cut off the butt ends, because we don't want to use those. Cut off the butt ends. All right, now, this is the way it looks like the other way. So I'm pushing my hands along, making sure that every piece is exactly the same size. All right, now, this is catering size, so we're going to go a bit smaller than we'd normally go on a normal day when we're selling it. So I'm going to score half. I'm going to cut this whole thing in half. Now, this is what I'm ending up with. A piece this size. See that? So now, I'm going to take it, I'm going to score again. So you always score first and step back and say, okay, is that half? Yes, that's half. That's great. So out of this piece, I'm going to get 4, 6, 8, 12. So 4 equal pieces. Once you've scored, and you're sure it's equal, so that all pieces come out the same, then you can cut. So I've scored, now I'm cutting, because I'm sure that it's the right size. Same with this piece. I'm going to score first, step back. Is it half? Yes. Half, half, score, step back, and now cut. And now, you place these on to a baking sheet. And the way you place them is, you take both your hands, and they go 3 by 6, 3 by 5, 3 by 5. I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, we've got one extra. I don't know how that works. Never mind, we'll get that on. All right, so then you take your cinnamon biscuits like this, and then you open them up so that they all look the same. You want them all to look like this. Isn't that perfect? And they go into the oven. The combi oven works really well, 350, and it's about 12 to 15 minutes. So in these go for about 12 minutes. And I'll show you what we do at the very end. Aren't they perfect? They are perfect. The apple cinnamon swirls are out of the oven after 12 minutes. Look at, they're beautiful. You take your glaze, which is basically icing sugar and water, and you just glaze them while they're exceedingly hot. And that gives them a beautiful glaze. And when you're doing baking, you always do it the same way. You don't change your arm pattern or your direction. It's all the same. And that's because I'm very anal. And I want you to be anal about your baking as well. Aren't those beautiful? These are real crowd pleasers. And that's the glaze. Now they sit and you put them out, and everybody's going to have a great treat today. Apple cinnamon swirls.